guys, it's Nat, and I know a long time no see, but hopefully I will be back to posting once a week, fingers crossed. But yeah, I know this video is long overdue. It's already 3 months into 2021, but I finally decided to share with you my favorite books of 2020. Most of these I don't think came out in 2020, but that is when I read them. I only have 7 books to share with you today, but I think I can definitely classify these as my top books of 2020. 2020, weirdly enough, wasn't the best reading year for me in terms of the quality of books I was reading. I don't actually know how many books I read, but I know that I had trouble finding which books I wanted to include on this list because a lot of them were very disappointing. But yeah, as I said, these are my favorite, so let's just get on into the video. So I'm gonna start off with the 2 fantasy books that I read and really enjoyed. So the first one being Serpent and Dove by Shelby Maharan. So this debuted has everything I love in a book. It is a slow burn, enemies to lovers romance set in a fantasy world following witches and witch hunters, and it just was like the icing on the cake. It was so good as a debut and a first book to a trilogy. I haven't read the second book yet, and I know the third one is coming out soon, so hopefully I will do that. So we follow Lou, who has fled her coven and forsaken all magic, living off whatever she could steal. She has to be careful in the city of Cesarine, where she lives now, as witches are feared, hunted, and burned at the stake. We also follow a huntsman called Reed, who kind of works for the church, and he hunts witches and sentences them to die. And then his and Lou's lives intertwine when she does something that causes both of them to be forced into holy matrimony, aka marriage. And it's basically, as I said, a slow burn romance set in this amazing fantasy world, and I just really enjoyed it. I thought it was a fabulous debut. It had everything I loved, and I also absolutely loved the pace of the story. I was never bored from start to finish. I really loved following both Lou's and Reed's perspectives because we got to see what the huntsman was thinking and what the witch was thinking. I am curious to see where the story goes in the second book. I did hear that the second book isn't as good. It's very slow and not a lot happens, but maybe we'll see some world building. I really loved the side characters in this one as well, and always when I love the side characters in a book, it's gonna be a favorite book of mine because I just need to like everything. And in this one I loved the protagonists, the side characters, the world, the plot, the setting. It was just, as I said, icing on the cake. The next one is Vicious by V.E. Schwab. So finally I gave V.E. or Victoria Schwab a go, and I'm so glad I started off with Vicious because Vicious is kind of a morally grey story following Victor and Eli, who become kind of fascinated with EOs, extraordinary. And basically I think it's Eli that does a research paper on EOs, and he just kind of sucks Victor into it, and they end up becoming EOs themselves. So how you become an EO is basically have to be at the edge of death, and then you're brought back to life, and then if you've gone through something very traumatic and it works, you get superpowers. And then we follow 10 years later after Victor breaks out of prison, and he is dead set on revenge on the man that put him there, which is his college roommate Eli. And then we basically follow both Eli and Victor. I think from what I remember, if this is correct, we follow them back in college and then 10 years later, and it's kind of intertwined. It was so good. I of course loved following Victor's perspective. He has a girl on his side that can raise the dead, which, oh my god, was so good. And then Eli has a girl on his side that can manipulate people's thoughts, and she can make them do whatever she wants them to do. And then yeah, Victor is set on getting revenge, and then Eli is actually set on getting rid of EOs because he thinks they're an abomination, even though he is one himself. So I just really loved it. I haven't picked up Vengeful, which I think is the second book, and the last book, it's only a duology, but I really need to because I want to see where the story goes, and I really love the characters and the pace, and I really like V. Schwab's writing, so I think I'm definitely going to give her other series a go when I'm in the mood for a fantasy. I just really loved this. Morally grey characters, still had someone to root for, so good. And I really liked that it also felt like I was reading kind of like a suspense thriller novel, because, you know, there's policemen there and like there's crime investigations, like why are people dying even though they're like EOs. So good. I'm so glad I finally gave this author and this story a go. So now onto the two romances that were top for me in 2020. So the first one being The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. I've actually already read this book twice because I loved it so much. It's basically a office romance that's quite light-hearted, I would say, and it's an enemies to lovers. In this one we follow Lucy and Josh, who sit across from each other at work. They basically have like two desks facing each other because they are assistants to the CEOs of a publishing house that have to like come together to form one publishing house. And now there's two CEOs, two CEOs assistants, and yeah, they basically hate each other. They always play pranks on one another, and yeah, once both Lucy and Josh are put up for a promotion, things escalate. Lucy is just like, I'm done with putting up with Josh, so let's end this like feud once and for all. And of course that doesn't happen, because once like tensions rise past the boiling point, feelings start emerging. And I actually really loved this. It's such a quirky, fun read. I absolutely love Lucy. Josh was okay as a character, like I liked him, but Lucy was like the icing on the cake. I'm probably going to use that phrase a lot because I really like it at the moment. It just was so fun to read, and I just loved the pacing of the romance and like all the things that were coming to light as we got further into the story. I just really loved that, and I hope I find more books like this one because it made me laugh out loud, and I just really loved how quickly I read it. I just remember both times that I read it, I had so much fun reading this book. And then the second romance book that I have on this list is Breathless by Lex Martin. I absolutely love Lex Martin. She's one of my favorite new adult romance writers, and this one is perfect for fans of small town friends to lovers romances that just like hit you so hard because the characters are just so precious. So yeah, basically this one is actually like a standalone book, but it's the third one and I think the last one in a series that we follow. It's like, I think it's called Texas Night series, but I'm not 100% sure. It is set in Texas, so if you like horses and like romances set in a small town, you will love this one. We follow Joey, who left the town without saying goodbye to her best friend Logan, and she basically wanted to kind of like run away, but she didn't call it run away, she just said escaping, because she has had a long time childhood crush on Logan and she just is sick of it, so she wants to get over him, and she escapes, I think, to Florida. Well, I say escapes, runs away to Florida, but she comes back because she left one important thing behind, her heart, and she's determined to get it back for good. And then we also follow Logan, who is pissed off that his best friend left without saying goodbye, like he didn't expect her to ghost him. And then when she comes back, he realizes like he can't really live without her, he missed her so much, so it is his mission to make her stay for good. Oh my god, this one I loved so much. I just loved the setting we were in. I was already familiar with the town because I already read 2 books set in the same place, and I don't know, I just really love how Lex Martin writes her romances, the tensions there. I always like the pace of the story. I always like what actually happens, because you know in romances you have like the build up, then something happens, and then like the ending. I just really enjoyed it. It was fun, it was unexpected. I loved seeing Kat, Brady, Ethan and Tori, who are like couples from the previous books. I always love reading stories like this where like you can read other books in these series but you can still read them as standalones, because it always feels very nostalgic when I'm reading like the last book. That's what I love about romances and the series. It always follows like different characters and different couples, but it always comes together and it just feels like home. So yeah, I really liked it. Beautiful romance story that I have also already reread and I love it so much. Now on to two kind of crime thriller suspense books. So the first one is I Am Deaf by Chris Carter. This is actually the 7th book, and I think it was the last book at the time that I had to be finally caught up with the series. There's 11 books in this series. I'm all caught up, and basically in the Robert Hunter series we follow Robert Hunter, who is an LAPD special agent in the ultra-violent unit, and his partner Carlos Garcia. We always follow them in the books following different serial killers and like the crimes. And yeah, I always love most of the stories that Chris Carter creates. Like, these are so much fun to read, even though they're about serial killers. I always love finding out at the end why the serial killer kills and like what made him into this monster. And I once thought that I wasn't going to be a fan of like following police officers trying to uncover crimes, but Robert Hunter is just amazing. I've read so many of the books in this series that I'll like know his backstory and his like partners Carlos Garcia's stories so well, like their lives. They just feel like a part of my life in a way. But yeah, in this one we find out that a 20-year-old woman's body has been found on like the green grass near the LA International Airport, and she has been left with her limbs stretched out into a 5-pointed star. The autopsy reveals that she has been murdered in one of the worst ways possible, but the surprises don't end there, and then that's what I'm going to tell you about the story. I always love going into Chris Carter books only knowing like the title of the book and then that's it. I do find that I really love the whole story. I'm always gripped from the start. I think the pacing of Chris Carter books is amazing. It's never like info dumpy. You never feel like overwhelmed with some of like the forensic phrases and stuff like that, but I just really loved this book. I find that I always am like at the edge of my seat till the end of the story, and yeah, that's why I decided to put this one on the list as well of my favorite books of 2020. And then the last thriller book that I have is The Good Daughter by Karen Slaughter. So I'd kind of call this more like a crime suspense story because I don't think there's a lot of like thriller aspects in it. But in this one we follow Charlotte and Samantha and how a tragedy befell on their family that left Charlotte's and Samantha's mother dead and their father, who is like a notorious defense attorney, in ruins. And basically 28 years later, I believe, tragedy hits the town again and Charlotte has become a defense attorney like her father, and then basically because the tragedy that befell the town 28 years later is bringing back painful memories that Charlie is trying to suppress, but secrets about what happened to their family aren't going to stay buried forever, and then it basically follows from there. I really enjoyed it. It's a very painful and sad story to read, but I highly recommend the audio version because that's how I consumed this story, and I just found it to be fascinating. It kind of gave me similar vibes when I was reading it as To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. So if you like kind of following like the law and like those kind of stories, I highly recommend this one because I kept putting it off, but it was a fantastic suspense novel to read. Okay, so the last book is basically The Secret Barrister. So this follows the stories of the law set in Britain and how the law is broken. So that's what I really enjoyed about this book. I find that a lot of law books, when I was looking for them, they're like set in the American legal system, and I personally, because I studied law in Britain, I know the English and Welsh system. So just like kind of from my experience when I was studying the criminal system, I already saw a lot of flaws and how it could be broken and like how it could be abused, but just like seeing it in real life situations that this barrister explains really well. He kind of explains in like a comical, easy way that even like a layperson, so just a random person on the street, can read and enjoy and like find fascinating and eye-opening. It was just like so good. I think I also listened to it as an audiobook, so highly recommend this one. It's so good and it was very eye-opening. So yeah guys, that is it for my favorite books of 2020. I know this video was late, but I hope you still guys enjoyed seeing what books were my top books of last year. Let me know down below your favorite books of 2020, as I would love to know, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye guys.